Alright, welcome to the tutorial. So in today's tutorial, we're going to talk about post-processing and we're going to find out what exactly is post-processing about and how do we set up post-processing in Unity. So what exactly is post-processing about? So post-processing itself is actually basically adding a effects, okay? So basically kind of like when you took a video and initially the video after you have taken right is considered a raw footage. So from this footage that you have taken from a camera, okay, you want to do a post processing. Okay, so the word post comes from after you have taken the video or image. Then the process refers to like adding effects like blur, glow, brightness, anti-aliasing, etc., etc. Right. So generally, this process makes use of things like pixel shaders, vertex shaders, etc. to produce these effects after you have taken the raw images or raw footage. So a list of different type of post-processing effects will kind of list out here in the below. I mean there are more, but generally we'll be focusing on this few. Right. So there are ambient occlusion, anti-aliasing, bloom, blur, color grading, film grain, fog, as well as vignette. Okay, so we'll just take a look at a couple of them to kind of understand a bit more. So for the very first one that we're going to take a look is ambient occlusion. So ambient occlusion itself is basically putting it short, making areas that are dark even darker. Right. So what's the rationale with that? Right, is to make the object right more contrasting. Right. From the example on the right side, you can see right? Uh, Areas that are inside, right, is actually much more darker with AO enabled. Right, so this kind of, I mean, with these effects being added, right, it makes your model or your environment more contrasting. Therefore, the darker area will be darker, and I mean, leaving the brighter area as it is. Okay, so like kind of corners, it will be really dark. And there are some other type of AO, but they are generally still under the ambient occlusion family. Right, and these are some of the settings that you may see in your game setting when you play a game. Other visual effects, right, is kind of like bloom, right? So bloom is kind of like the direct opposite of AO, whereby we are making the brighter part even brighter, right? So on the right side image, right, you can see that the sun is like literally growing and like lighting up the whole scene, right? Even like for the water area, right, it wasn't so bright without the bloom, right? And with the bloom on right, so it's gonna be even brighter, right? So kind of like a reflection of the sunlight from the water. So the process of bloom itself, right, there's actually makes use of a few passes. So one of it is bright pass filter. So that will actually extrude all the bright areas of the screen. And subsequently, there will be a few passes of blur, right, to make the glowy effects. And after all these passes, right, the final steps, right, is actually to kind of like blend them all together using additive blending. So with that additive blending, right, we are kind of like adding all the different effects or different layers and passes together, and to give you the final product, whereby it's a very glowy effect. Moving on for color grading, okay, as you can see from the image of the on your right, okay, the image on the very right, okay, is kind of like yellowish or reddish, and the one on the left is kind of like bluish. Okay, so basically this is the color temperature setting, whereby you're actually making, um, you're kind of like setting the environment or the feel for the scene itself, right? So generally warm color, right, it will be more reddish, more yellowish and stuff. And for colder color, right, will be more towards the bluish tint. Right, so this can be used for like in a night scene. It will more towards the colder side, which is the blue, and for like day afternoon scene, right, it will be more on the warm side. Okay, so this is color grading and particularly color temperatures that you can play with later on. The last effect that we're going to talk about is actually the vignette effect. So vignette effect very straightforward that you can see from all these images. The corners are kind of like there's a black shadow, right? So this kind of gives the player or the experience of immersiveness, whereby focusing the attention of the player at the center of the screen, right? I mean, it's a very subtle effect whereby if you play game typically you wouldn't notice it, but I think it's a very good effect to keep the player focused on the area that you want, which is kind of like mostly in the center of the screen most of the time. So that's VNet, and we're gonna implement this as well later on. Alright, so kind of like how this whole post processing works, right? It's basically in your scene, your Unity scene editor, right? You can design your scene 2D, 3D, and stuff. And after you have done that, right, basically there's a process called rasterizing. So what rasterizing does, right, basically from your 3D scene, it will kind of like flatten it onto a 2D kind of 2D pixel array lah, whereby it will determine like which array, which pixel will be which color. Okay, so all this process, right, has not been displayed onto your screen just yet. Okay, so it's still in the buffer, okay, on your graphics card or on your CPU. Right, so with that information, right, then comes the post-processing. Okay, so whereby post-processing you can do like, let's say for bloom, you can extract all the bright stuff, blur it, and then additive blend it back together again. Right, after you have do the post-processing, it's then pushing out all these processed pixels onto your monitor screen, and that's kind of like the outcome that you will see, which is those area that you have been processed is gonna be brighter or any other effects and stuff, right? So generally that's kind of the process whereby from a editor all the way to what's on the monitor. Okay, so post processing is kind of like in the middle but near towards the end stage. So how do we do post processing in Unity? Okay, it's pretty simple. It's just generally 5 steps in Unity. Okay, so first is to install the package from the package manager. Then after that, we want to add an additional component called post process layer onto the camera. And after that, right, we need to create another game object and add the post process volume component. Okay, and we have to remember to change the layer. That's very important. Lastly, we're going to create a profile to determine what are the effects and what are some of the settings of the effects. Okay, so some of the effects that we have are ambient occlusion, bloom, color grading, and vignette. Right. So what we're gonna do is to jump onto Unity now. Right. So in Unity, basically, I got this scene from the asset store. Right. And the very first thing we want to do is to actually go to the package manager and look for post process. Okay. So this is the package that we want to install. So while the package is installing, right, post process used to be long ago a kind of a paid feature. So you kind of need to get Unity Pro to have this feature, to use this feature lah. And subsequently, it was being free, and it was like part of Unity. Then like now, recent years, it was being removed, and you have got to download them separately. Alright, now that it's done, I'm gonna close this. Right, so very first thing that we want to do is to go to camera, add a component, and we want to add the post-process layer. Alright, so post-process layer is mainly for the camera, and we're gonna say which layer do we want to kind of process. So for the layer, right, choose post-processing. Okay, anti-aliasing, let's just choose any one. Alright, so that's all for your cameras. And next, what we want to do is to create an empty object. Maybe let's call it post-process volume. Okay, and we want to add the post-process volume. And for simplicity's sake, we're just gonna use is global. Okay. Yeah, remember to change it to post-processing layer. Okay, this is very important. Most people miss this out and it wouldn't work. With that done, we're gonna create a profile for it. So simply by pressing the new icon here. Okay. So after you press new, okay, we want to add the effects. So for effects, we can add ambient occlusion. So we need to enable the fill settings. So with the first two settings enabled, right, we can actually see the change right away. Let's keep this as 0.5. Oh, 0.5. Yeah. And we're gonna add more effects that maybe like bloom. Same thing, enable some of the properties. Maybe the first three. Okay. So intensity, I'm gonna just like throw 10. And let's just keep threshold as 1 and soft knee as 0. Okay. So the terms itself are pretty complicated, but For recommendation, just eyeball the color and the style that you want. Will be easier lah. Next, we'll move on to color grading. So same thing, enable some of the properties. And for me, normally I like to choose ASIC. Okay. Right. So if you are doing a darker game, this will work. But of course, you can go back and light up the scene and stuff. Okay. So all depends on how you want to balance balance all these settings. Right. So moving back, where are we? Okay. Last one more effect. Let's add the vignette in very quickly. Okay. Same thing. Enable some of the properties. And increase play with the intensity. Okay, so let's maybe just put it 0.4. Okay, so kind of like this is what we have very quickly. Okay, just enable some of the properties. Yeah, I think another thing that we mentioned about warm colors and cold colors, right? So basically that's the temperature. So if you're gonna say cold, kind of like this is kind of like for kind of like a night scene. Okay, it's colder. If you want to do a daytime afternoon scene, probably the warmer side. Okay, right. So that's kind of like how you set up post-processing in Unity. It's a pretty straightforward feature, and it doesn't take you long, but it makes your game really nice and kind of like if let's say you're doing like sci-fi or doing games that has a lot of neon effect, post-processing I would say is a very important feature that you should kind of must have in your game, and to make it really look like a sci-fi and glowy kind of effects right. So I mean with that, that's kind of like what I have for post-processing in Unity, right? So do play around with the settings, try other effects, okay, like motion blur, depth of field, etc. Right? So all this kind of will enhance your game, but of course use them as when you need it. Okay, don't like kind of if you don't need just force it, and also not too much of it as well. Oh, so yeah, that's all what I have for you for post processing in Unity. And once again, good luck, have fun, design awesome levels, and I look forward to seeing your levels.